This is a demonstration of the new combat fatigue system. I'm going to go over some of the features of it. So hopefully this will be useful. So the purpose of the combat fatigue system is explained in the setup where this video is posted. But in short, what it does is it expands the window of slotting that usually happens on the release of a large or any sized orbat by instead of focusing on the first couple of milliseconds of release and who can get there first, it tries to widen it out to the first 15 minutes, and it does this using a number of factors. So the first thing you have to understand about combat fatigue is a number of seconds applied to every single one of your tiers. So we can go to the practice area first to understand this. So each one of your combat areas that you belong to, you see here, like my top three really are medical, field leadership and core infantry. Each one of these tiers will have a differing combat fatigue depending on how long I've spent in these roles. So let's take field leadership as an example. Now you're going to see a new section of the progression view called combat fatigue, and let me explain how this works. So the more time you spend in a certain area within a small period, so this is based on 30 days. So in the last 30 days, I've been on 4 operations as a leader, or in a leadership role. What the combat fatigue system is doing is it's penalising me on all future orbats for all previous orbats in a 30-day period. So you can see it's given me a penalty of 240 seconds for combat activity, in leadership, based on my last 30 days. Now this fatigue updates at the same time as tiers do, which is about 0600 UTC. So what it's saying is for any orbats that release in the next day or so, for example, it's going to give me a 240 second penalty on any slot that's a leadership slot. But you can see that actually that's not true, because whilst my combat activity penalty is 240 seconds, my total penalty on my total fatigue for leadership is 120 seconds, right? And that's because I've been given a bonus for recent FTXs that I've been on. So let's actually go through the entirety of what's available through the combat fatigue system. So total fatigue is what's applied to the orbat release. And it's made up of a number of seconds for reprimands. So for example, no-shows or any other policy break that you break, you actually get 120 seconds penalty. So if you get a no-show in the last 30 days, 120 seconds will be added to all slots, all fatigue across all orbats. So it is quite a serious penalty. Combat activity is 60 seconds per orbat. So for example, if you've been to 10 field leadership positions in the last month, your penalty will be 600 seconds by default. So the people that are hyperactive, that take a lot of slots, it will start to slow you down as you take lots and lots of slots up. But only the key point here is only in this area. So you can take a lot of leadership slots, and it will become harder and harder and harder to get a leadership slot if you keep going at that pace. But what you can do if you've got 2 or 3 combat areas that you enjoy is you can switch over to the other. And you've got procedural correction flags. If you're not sure what they are, basically every user is rated on or SOP of a certain area. So I can't really, I suppose I could probably show you the system. I'll go to Ben, who's now retired. So this is Ben's field leadership profile. And you can see here, these are all the policies that relate to field leadership. I can see here that he's read these and what date he last read them. This is the date he last practiced them. Now, if I don't believe Ben's able to do a certain thing, I can actually flag him. So I can click on this flag here for leadership in UNITAF, and it will turn that flag red. That's a procedural correction flag. It's when I need somebody to be, or we need somebody to be corrected on a certain procedure that they're doing wrong. And so every procedure correction flag you have in that combat area, you actually get a 30-second penalty as well. And then for recent FTXs, if you've been in an FTX in the last 30 days in this combat area, it actually gives you a bonus. So if you'd, and I think I've actually got an equality bonus on core infantry. So let's go back and have a look at core infantry. Maybe I don't. I thought I did. That would have been nice. But it is possible to neutralise your fatigue through FTXs. And so what it's saying is that if you've been to a recent practice, then we'll actually give you a bonus, because we'd prefer someone that's been to a recent practice to somebody that hasn't. So it doesn't have a huge impact, but every FTX you do will neutralise an operation. So if you've been to 2 ops in a month, but you've been to 2 FTXs, which is the case for a lot of recruits in their first 30 days, then recruits will have a massive head start for core infantry slots, because they'll also have a bonus from their recent FTXs, but they won't have any history in the past 30 days. So that's where you can find out about your combat fatigue, and that's where it's broken down. And like I say, it's different for every area. So if we just have a look at medical, for example, you can see my fatigue there is 60 seconds. Let's see what else I've played as recently. I don't think really much. You can see 60 seconds. So most fatigue is, as you know, not very low at all. The most I've seen in the database is, I think, 10 minutes. So there are some people that have been in like core infantry slots 20 times in the last 30 days, and so they are being penalised to sort of 10 minutes just to give other people a chance to grab slots. But obviously there's scope for that to increase the more that, the more that popular operations are. So that's where you can find it. Let's now look at an all-bat. So this is the all-bat for Sunday the 30th of May, but empty. Let's have a look at this all-bat. Now this is back in time a little bit. This is now thinking that this all-bat releases in 5 minutes time. So this is on the test system, and this is what a locked all-bat looks like. So before, you used to just have a black button that just said that the operation is not not open yet. I'm also going to close pre-slotting, because that's a leadership applicable thing which will confuse matters, so let's just turn that off. So what we're actually looking at now is the UTC time that every single slot's going to become available to me. So what it's saying is your combat fatigue in this area is 120 seconds. This is the time that you're able to slot for this role. Check your tier progression record for more information. So I can see on the right hand side, this is always visible, that the release time for this all-bat is 0800 UTC on the 30th of May. So you'll see some of these slots, like this AT light slot, actually is saying 0800, so that releases at 0800. And some slots aren't, so you've got 802 for FTL, 801 for AR, and so on. So you can see, for me at least, the highest impact seems to be 804, which is for mission support, which is kind of a moot point because most mission support roles are pre-assigned before all that release. So for someone like me, and my sort of pattern of deployment and sort of my overall activity, which is not as high as a lot of people's, the impact of combat fatigue is not huge to me. However, if I'd been only ever in one role, so like let's say marksmanship is a real prime candidate for the combat fatigue system, then it's going to give me a greater and greater combat fatigue to give other people those slots. Now, one other important thing to note about combat fatigue is that some roles, and I've got some data I can show you on this, are not as popular as others, right? So there are some what we would consider, I guess, rare roles. So I'll just show you a breakdown of roles. So this is live data of slots in the last 90 days. So this is 90 days on the right, 60 days, and then 30 days. So these are slots completed, so on all bats, filled slots. So we've deployed just over 1,000 core infantry slots in the last 3 months. Now, the interesting ones are these four here: rotary, so both rotary and fixed aircrew, communication, and marksmanship. And maybe to some point cavalry, anti-vehicle, combat support, but specifically these roles that have got less than 30 slots per month. Just so you're aware, if currently in the current code at least, if a slot has less than 30 slots in the preceding 30 days, then rather than looking at 30 days, it actually looks at 60 days. So just so it's really clear, A marksmanship role in this case will look at 60 days of history to calculate combat fatigue. So the combat fatigue will be much higher for these slots. I say it won't necessarily be higher because there'll be less deployments, but certainly it's looking at 2 months of history, both for FTXs and both for combat fatigue, rather than one. And that would apply to any role in any case where there's less than 30 slots per month. So that's just worth mentioning. We've got 2 minutes left to go on this release. I'm going to hurry it up a little bit just by forcing it through the database to release a little bit earlier. And then we'll be able to see that update come a little bit faster. So I'm going to put that at 08:07:59. And then let's see what happens when the Orbat releases. Now, the other thing you'll notice here is this little icon, but I'll come back to that in another video. And these ones that say up tiering required basically just means that on release for the Orbat, you won't have immediate access to these slots because you'll require up tiering either through 1UP or 2UP. So it's just letting you know that ahead of time, so it's not news to you. And this hopefully will help people to decide what role they want, before the Orbat's even released, which is handy. So the Orbat's now released, so I'll get a refresh of the page, and we can see that some roles are now available. So the roles that are available immediate to me are now green with the deploy button. So I could go ahead and grab one of those. And then the roles that are fatigued for me are now still have times on. So you can see this is a fatigue of 60 seconds. So you can see the clock still going. So in about 28 seconds or so, I could be able to do a page refresh and get ahead to these slots here. So we'll wait for that to happen. And you can see that the 1UP slots and the 2UP slots just work as they did before once the release has happened. But also this time, the fatigue time applies not just to release, but it also applies to 1UP and 2UP times. So you can see my 2UP for Senior Game Master is 8:03 in 2 days' time. So it's added the combat fatigue as well as the 48-hour delay for the 2UP. We give the page a refresh again, and you can see suddenly a lot more has become available to me after the 60-second fatigue timer, pretty much most roles actually. And so I can obviously switch between if a role is available to me that I want. And you can obviously work out from that when the next round of fatigue comes through in a minute, I'll be at a slot in the 8:01 slots as well. And like I say, this applies to the original release time of an Orbat. It applies to the 1UP timer and the 2UP timer. What it helps to do is distribute slotting over the first 10 or 15 minutes of an Orbat and gives priority access to people that have not had the chance to take those slots, but are those that are of equal qualification. If you have a different tier to somebody else, the fatigue system won't make a difference to when you get a slot. It's only people that are of equal tier to you that it's actually going to impact supply and demand on. So hopefully that's a good overview. There'll be some text that accompanies this video that's kind of essential to understand the system as well, so I'd recommend that you also view that. But thank you for watching. Hopefully that was useful.